Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us on this early Saturday morning. My name is Vanessa Quiroz-Carter. I'm Watsonville Mayor, and I'm here to welcome you this morning. Before we begin, I just wanted to make a quick comment. So we are having a special meeting today, but we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to have sort of workshop style as opposed to our more formal, regular style of meeting. So we will not have a public comment section, oral public comment section, but instead we are encouraging you to write your public comments, and those will be captured. So there's an opportunity for everyone to give their public comment with those written comments. So I just wanted to make that announcement. And now may I have a roll call, please?
Clark, present. Teresa, here. Montesino, here. Orozco,
Here.
Parker,
Yes, here.
Salcido,
Here.
and Quiroz-Carter.
Here.
We have one.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Justin Meek and Susan Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
This works great. Wide mic. I'm Justin Meek, Assistant Community Development Director. I just want to make a quick introduction of the team here today. First, let me introduce David Sargent, Sergeant Town Planning. They're with the lead consultant that's helping with the preparation of the general plan as we think about the future. Next to him is Juan Gomez, who is his right-hand man. He does all the heavy lifting. We have Miranda with Media Hunt. She's an expert in aviation. Susan Harding is with Circle Point, a terrific facilitator who's going to help with today's meeting and also be working on the EIR for the general plan. And at the end of the table, not last but not least, is Ben Sigmund with EPS, and he's helping with economic analysis as part of the general plan as well. Of course, Susie, Miriam, as well as the other directors of the city are in attendance today and are available with questions as we get into the interactive discussion.
That's good.
Yes.
Circle Point?
That's the name of the consulting firm.
Circle Point is the name of my firm. It's a small DVE engagement and environmental.
Okay, thank you.
They're responsible for leading, helping us orchestrate the conversation. They're also going to be responsible for bringing the environment back and forth.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what.
Yeah, so for example, at some of our outreach events, like at the plaza and elsewhere, we've had some of the staff on hand to help with outreach, as well as on materials that we have. Let me just touch on the agenda real quick, just to highlight just sort of the general flow of how we anticipate the meeting to go today. We're obviously in our orientation welcome right now. I'm going to give a brief presentation just on the general overview, just on the general plan itself, what we've heard so far, to help set up the conversation about what the direction of this program would like to have. As we've heard from the public, talk about some key planning areas, and then we'll have a lot of time to go into our first interactive discussion, small group discussion around tables and maps on the walls, and then bring people back together for more of a facilitated conversation. And that's where Susan is going to help. We'll have a brief break, just to give time for people to.
So kind.
Yes. And I know there are some light refreshments as well. And then we'll be going into another brief presentation just to set the discussion to help ground it in some of the growth scenarios that we want to talk about today. Again, followed by a more interactive, longer period for group discussion, both in small tables and then facilitate group discussion. And then afterwards, bring it back together for council to have time to deliberate and share their views as well. We'll summarize it afterwards with pre-summaries and highlight a few next steps. And that should be the conclusion of this meeting.
So we wanted to do a quick opening round just to, from the council members to hear what's one outcome that you hope for during today's meeting. And we'll come back to those at the end, and hopefully we'll have achieved those outcomes. But you probably have more than one, but if you could just share one outcome that you have for one desired outcome for this morning's meeting. We can start with the mayor.
A desired outcome, I hope we get a lot of public feedback.
And I hope after it's the same.
I hope that we're able to have a really in-depth discussion And as far as the outcome, I'm hopeful that we're able to incorporate everyone's desires tonight, or today, this morning, I'm sorry. Along with the public's feedback, which I think is very important as we move forward.
A desired outcome for myself would be more clarity with what is going on, not just for the council, but for the community. Thank you.
I'd like to have a better understanding of the direction we're heading for the zoning of our city and the areas that will be changing to accommodate the growth of our city.
For me, is educating the public. Because, you know, in Circle, what was it? Circle Point, you're gonna be critical. Spanish, you know, getting getting, you know, the community informed of the positives.
Well, Councilman Dutra expressed mine about zoning and the clarification, but I'd also like to say one of the outcomes I'd like to see is less litigation that we're involved in with our updates.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing a vision of the future, and I'd like to thank everyone that's here today, and I want to hear from each and every one of you. I hope that we have a really robust discussion and that your voices are heard.
Thank you. Well, we're going to touch on all these topics, I think, today. We have given a lot of time to go over it and with its space. One thing I just want to just ground the conversation first is just to highlight, you know, the purpose of the general plan, not only for council but public alike, is really a guide for the future of Watsonville. As many of you already know, and the public too, it hasn't been updated for nearly 30 years. And so this is a good opportunity to look at a comprehensive update. As we think about the future, as we think about what vision for Watsonville, where and how it might evolve and change over time. One thing to highlight too, there are some requirements for state law for any general plan, and we'll touch on that as well. And as with any general plan, there are certain required elements, everything from land use to transportation, safety, and conservation of open space, and things along those lines. And those will be all part of the past and current general plan moving forward. And we're going to be focused primarily today on land use, but the other elements are interrelated as we think about the community. What kind of public services might need to be added or extended to accommodate growth, for example? How are the street networks anything that accommodate all modes of transportation? Thinking about safety, and especially in light of climate change. And what we're seeing in terms of increased potential for flooding and other natural disasters, as well as new laws that relate to environmental justice and portions of the community that are considered disadvantaged and need additional resources and attention. In terms of the project schedule, we started this effort close to a year ago and did a number of outreach events as our initial what we call discovery phase. And that was looking at the past general plans from the guiding principles of it and reaching out to the community, council, and others alike on what they think about Watsonville, what resonates with them, what they want to see happen. Right now, we're at the stage where we prepared a range of land use alternatives. Up next would be a preferred alternative, so that we can not only continue to move forward on preparing the general plan, but also the environmental review based off that preferred alternative. Based on the schedule, we would anticipate being able to have a public review draft of the EIR, which usually takes easily 9 months to prepare towards the end of the year, which allow the public review period into next year and around that time the opportunity for adoption. The range of community outreach, we've been to council and planning commission in the past, so we've been to workshops, we have a community advisory committee meeting, we have technical advisory meetings, we do a number of outreach events in Plaza, pop-up events. I was just with the Teen Action Council the other week and speaking to them about the general plan too. So we look for a range of ways in which to reach the community to hear from them. And just as a little infographic of what was accomplished during the outreach phase of the during that phase. And we're doing this is just a highlight all the various ways we're very good people. And along those lines, I just want to highlight, some of these quotes that we've heard today that speak to Watsonville, kind of place that people think about it already. It's a small town that they really have a connection to. We've, of course, heard a number of things, everything from the desire for being able to do more in town rather than having to leave town for things like shopping. And of course, housing comes up a lot in the availability and affordability of housing. Other things that include, and I'm not going to read through every one of these, but just to highlight that we've also heard a lot on how people get around and whether they can do so by other means than driving. And things, and kids, and the importance of kids and programs to help support their lives and move forward. Not just housing, but jobs and economic development is a key theme that is important to any general plan, and we've heard a lot on that topic. And really it informs the kind of investments that will be highlighted as what's needed to move forward. Taking all this feedback and looking at past general plans, we organize it into these guiding principles and key values and kind of results that we'd like to see happen. Highlighting, as I mentioned before, the small town character and really focusing on infill and revitalizing your downtown, how we get around, what kind of amenities, make it an inviting, loving place, particularly how we make our streets really inviting and safe, as well as looking at housing. And we're going to have a robust discussion on housing, what's possible with the different kind of growth scenarios, with infill, growth areas, and what's available. With any of these things, there's a strong ethic around preserving our open space land as well. And of course, economic development is key as part of this. So as we look at community, none of this is going to come as a surprise to the council, but here's how we're organizing it in terms of the different planning areas. Looking at downtown and the kind of infill potential that's already been planned for and we hope to see happen in the near to medium term. Also considering that RTC is working on the preliminary design environmental review for the rail line. So how do we think from a land use perspective, how we plan for the passenger rail station in the future? Looking at other areas that might change and have infill potential along our key corridors, whether it's Freedom or East Lake. We've heard a lot of people raising questions about places like the Kmart Center. But there's more corridors that we'll want to consider for places of possible change and at different time frames. In between those areas are neighborhoods which are largely built out, looking at what infill potential is there, where there's the likelihood of change and to what extent. And of course, not just housing, but employment. Where do people find jobs? Where are there opportunities? Are there more economic activity that we can imagine with the existing businesses and maybe new businesses that may come? Conversation around the airport is going to be front and center as part of this general plan meeting about council and community alike on various ranges of opinions on the airport and how that might influence some of our new growth areas within our urban limit line and beyond, as we think about where we accommodate more housing and different range of housing types, as well as more economic development, job generation type uses, and create more of a presence, taking advantage of, for example, Highway 1 as a gateway to the community. So that was a quick preview, and then dive in a little bit, a few more slides. I know these were provided in advance, so I'm not going to touch on every bullet point, because I want to give more time for discussion. When we think about infill, one of the key takeaways that I want to highlight is that, of course, we've already adopted the downtown Washington specific plan. That's changed the zoning to facilitate more infill growth in and around our downtown. That can help leverage with not only our existing municipal infrastructure that's available, although there are some upsides to the increases that's needed and that we're looking for funding to accomplish, but it allows us also to think about how we could focus a lot of it within our city limits today and in the medium term. As with any infill type development, it is more challenging typically than greenfield development in terms of assembling land, being able to redevelop underutilized sites, and so forth. So as we think about other areas that have been previously identified for potential growth, around Buena Vista, around Atkinson and the area called Atkinson Lane, Area C, and near the highway. These are some of the areas that are also under consideration for as part of the general plan update too. One of the key things that we'll highlight here is there's not only additional housing that can be provided in a range, there's also more opportunities for single family and for sale type housing products as well. So I just want to highlight that key takeaway. There are other challenges with these areas, everything from steep slopes to the extra cost of extending utilities to farmland and places in floodplains. Coming back to downtown real quickly, really focusing on helping to revitalize downtown is at the heart of this effort. We have a specific plan in place. There's passenger rail that is a long-term project, but is being designed. And in fact, I just want to put a plug out to RTC's open house meeting on Monday at Ramsey Park. And of course, they'll be coming to council on Tuesday to give a presentation on the purpose and need of that project as well. And so we might think of how to take advantage of that effort and help to provide better connection to downtown and other parts of the community too, as the community continues to grow and provide a viable transportation option for getting around the region in particular. Other corridors, such as the Freedom Corridor. Similar to downtown, there is some infill potential, but not as much. The type of housing stock that's likely here is similarly much more attached multifamily apartments and maybe smaller corridor type projects as well. It is within our city limits. These are some of the advantages. Disadvantages include, as with most of Watsonville, there's very limited vacant land to work with. And so it's more challenging whenever redevelopment of unutilized sites is at place, for the reason I talked about before. And the Freedom Corridor also is limited by airport safety zones, established housing development, in particular between zones 1 through 5, and mixed-use projects in all zones. So if we look at other corridors, one just to highlight, it's not just about Freedom, but East Lake as another area where there's potential for more infill, and in some places more or less than others. So you can think of some of the vacant lots that are near the East Lake Shopping Center, for example, or other utilized properties nearby. Those are possibilities for redevelopment over time. And so I've already highlighted many of the opportunities and challenges on this one. One key advantage here is they don't have the disadvantage of being proximate to the airport or those restricted safety zones. Other corridors that we think we may see some change, not in the near term, but perhaps in the medium to long term, could include along Main Street as well. Any of our commercial corridors may be subject to change, both because of state laws that allow for redevelopment commercial areas as housing, but as we think about things that may age over time and then might be ripe for buildings to be redone, we can provide direction of what that could look like. Key thing here is taking advantage of some of the amenities nearby, such as slew and trail system, and how we might frame a redevelopment that perhaps has more of a village feel that ties into those areas nicely. Highlighted, neighborhoods and the kinds of infill kind of housing in particular, since it's largely built out. There's a few small lots that does see some development, not as much as in our corridors and our downtown is what expected. We've seen ADUs and some townhome type products, and so there's a limited amount of more housing development that we expect in this area. And some of the focus that we'll want to work on is how to make the streets safer for particularly people getting between the neighborhoods and the commercial corridors and making it more inviting and safer place. And especially, and getting to more of our more active mixed-use zones along our corridors. This general plan is not just about housing, of course, but also economic development and jobs. So looking at supporting our existing businesses, but also laying the framework for adding new development, adding new industries and businesses to provide more job opportunities over time as well. It's a key aspect of what we're looking to accomplish And that's why we have people like UPS to help with market analysis to understand what's likely or could occur over time under these various scenarios. One of the main things to take away about the Route 1 or Highway 1 gateway concept, and we see that it's consistently recommended throughout, is that this is really the large economic opportunity for Watsonville over the long term. There's a lot of, as with any redevelopment, there's need for a lot of land oftentimes to introduce new businesses, taking advantage of highway visibility, both for inviting tourism with more visitor serving type development, but also other kinds of things that can be accommodated too. I've heard a lot from folks interest in everything from things like big box retail and Costco to maybe have more of a regional recreation center, like a soccer center. But these are things that can be accommodated in this area. One thing to highlight is we're not just looking at, we're also thinking that this could be a good place to have showcase agricultural venues that can tie into visitor serving, invite people here, highlighting the agricultural nature of Watsonville. And of course, with visitor serving, highlighting that while other communities have direct access to the beach, this can help facilitate people come to the beach as well. And also finding people from the highway into town at the same time, so they can have an economic benefit. There are some challenges. One benefit is also, unlike some of the other areas, it's largely outside of by-fire areas, but of course, it's within the 100-year floodplain, and those sort of constraints would have to be addressed during the development phase. Area C, on the other side of town, largely intended to be a place of coming to more housing, and unlike Buena Vista, it is outside of airport safety zones. Key challenge with this side of town beyond Wagner and East Lake is the fact that it's within ag land. One benefit compared to some of the areas is that it already has a lot of utilities that can be readily extended into the area, as shown in these series of slides. It's also largely outside of high fire danger zones, but is within the floodplain, and so that will need to be properly accounted for. A prelude to Buena Vista, another possible area for growth. It's largely within the urban limit line, although we're showing some slight adjustments. Key advantage, as with Area C, is the type of housing products that can be produced in this area could include a wide range, everything from single family to multi-family. And we have some illustrations at the tables to show what that can look like. It's a little bit harder to introduce some of the infrastructure into the area. It also, as you can see by the red rectangle and trapezoidal, it also has a large area that is restricted in terms of housing development because of its proximity to the classroom runway. And this is just the illustrations of some of the existing utilities that where they exist, what would need to be extended, and the fact that it's a little bit more expensive in areas that involve steeper slopes. This area also does have more wildlands, and so it has a slightly larger proportion of the area that is within the high fire zone. No discussion about this. It's not going to include discussion about the airport as well. And we've heard interest in or the possibility of the past and the present of the value of the airport and whether there might be other uses that become and whether or not it might close. And so we prepared some information on that as well, not necessarily recommendation, but information for discussion. Key points to take away here is, unlike the new growth areas, all of the airport is within the existing city limits and is largely flat, so no annexation or changing the limit line would be needed. With any change to an airport, it is a very long process to do so, and you'll see that reflected in some of the growth scenarios and expected numbers later on, so obviously we want to make sure that I highlight that. We'll talk more about it in a few minutes. And of course, there's other constraints in terms of the fact that there's hazardous materials that need to be properly mediated, and endangered species on site that also require mitigation as well. So that was intended to be a quick overview so that we can have more time in which to have the interactive discussion. And then we're going to have a number of specific questions that we're going to
Back one more slide before we get to there we go. So in the interest of having this more interactive and less formal, what we're going to do now is break and go into kind of a roam the room, open house style approach. So throughout the room, we have on the walls 4 of the different planning areas that were discussed: the neighborhoods, the downtown, the employment districts, and the corridors. At the tables, we have Area C, Highway 1, Buena Vista, and the airport. And we have Post-it notes, we have pens, we'll get some more notes and pens as well. And we may move the tables around because I think it's going to be a little congested back there. So we'll move some things around so the public and the council can get around those tables, ask questions of the project team that's here as well as city staff. We want this to be an opportunity to have your questions answered, to hear from the community, as well as just dig into the topics that are of concern to you and of interest as well. You may find that there's areas that you wish were included that aren't included, so be thinking about those areas that you wish weren't included, those sorts of questions. Other kind of unique opportunities that you think we may have missed, we want to hear those as well, and any concerns, of course, as well. We'll take about 35 minutes for this piece, and again, it's intended to be interactive, but maybe a little chaotic at first, but you can go to those areas that you'd like, and we can pull things off the wall if you'd like, and you can bring them over here. It's your workshop to help to direct, and we'll be here to help answer questions and guide you as much as we can. So let's go ahead and.
Just a quick clarification. It'll be us, but the public will get to comment and go around just like we would.
Yes, so you can have conversations together. So, but definitely want to make sure that you're at the table, so you get over to the table so you can get your questions answered.
Not that we know any answers.
And again, for Miranda is our airport expert, and Ben is economic development expert. We've got our urban design and planning team as well, and then of course you've got your city staff that know all the answers, right? So we'll move the tables around just to.
Can you tell us the state mandate on the house?
So if we could ask those questions during the interactive session, then when we come back, we'll have a larger discussion. We can kind of get some of those bigger picture questions too. There are some exhibits on the walls. There's another exhibit on the wall that's not in the slideshow that shows a little bit on housing as well, so you might be interested in that one. But if I could get some help moving some tables so that we can not have it so tight back there. Maybe this one here, Justin.
Freedom, Airport Boulevard, in a way that's gonna, offer housing and offer shopping or whatever needs to happen for, cities to flourish. I hear from people all the time that they have to go shopping out of town and they have to get everything that they want to do is out of town. Well, we're being prevented from doing a lot of things. We are also being prevented by the people voting and restricting our urban limit lines, but we're also being restricted by the zoning that we have from the airport right now. So I think that there was a better collaboration. I don't think that this discussion would be maybe as broad as it's going to have to get in this situation, but I do know that we have to take care of the people of this community, and if we're being prevented every single day from moving forward with certain projects, that's a problem. So hopefully we can have a conversation today about what will be the, a way we can work together to move forward, but we do need to address those issues that I spoke about throughout the city.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I should wait for her to stop writing. Okay. There's one takeaway that I have today that I had not heard before. There was a gentleman who mentioned pilot safety when it comes to the Crosswind roadway. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because that's something that all of us, at least as a group and in public, have not spoken about or we've not heard about. So that's a takeaway. There is something I do want to say though. It's something that always comes to my mind, and I brought it up the last time we did a group session like this. All of this building, all the zoning, all that stuff is great, right? But it's no good to anybody until we have a good foundation. And I've not heard once in any presentation about our infrastructure. And I know it's a public works thing, not a CDD thing. But we have massively failing infrastructure within the city right now. And so what are we gonna do to improve that before we add more stress and strain to it? That's all I got, thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot of, I wanna speak to the public for a second. I really appreciate the robust conversation we were having around the airport table. I think there was a lot of diversity in perspectives. So it's really nice to hear from everyone. The safety concern was brought up that I hadn't thought about, right? What are the unintended consequences of shortening or closing that runway? That would be one question. The other thing that I heard loud and clear is having clarity on how many total single units, housing units would be available if we were to close our runway and shorten it. What would be the difference? There was also a question about just addressing the empty spaces. And as a city, what it is that we're doing to ensure that we continue to foster and strengthen those relationships with the property owners so that we can attract those businesses, allow them to build, right? So what strategies do we have there? And going back to addressing the housing issue, I'm really excited about the Buena Vista possibility. For that reason, I think it allows for the opportunity for the city to diversify the type of housing that we can make available for residents. From single family use to infill housing to apartments, whatever it may be. So I think that component that addresses better, in my opinion, the type of opinions we're hearing from the larger community, right? Not everyone wants an apartment. Some families want a single family home, and that's okay. The other piece with that is how can we secure or ensure that the housing that we do develop goes to Watsonville residents. I think that's a key conversation that we need to have to move forward, right? We're here to represent the city and its residents. So if we're building housing, it should be going to Watsonville residents. Another question that was brought up too in having the conversation around the airport is, what would be the economic impact, economic development impact if we were to close the runway or simply shorten it?
All right. Really love the presentation. Very thorough. You know, I really like all those areas that we're talking about that we need to, you know, provide to that community. We need to provide the options and the latitude for these conversations. I want to thank everyone for being here and participating in these roundtables. These are great conversations, whether it's Buena Vista, Atkinson, you know, these are great, you know, points, because we need all of them. We need, you know, we just need to talk about, you know, all the possibilities, whether it's the closure of the emergency runway, whether it's Atkinson's. It's not only about housing, but it's economic development, because we don't have enough. As you can see, nobody's coming to Watsonville, you know, to go shopping. Nobody's coming to Watsonville and it being attractable and, you know, as an attraction. We need to provide those latitudes, because a lot of our need from the community is people going out to Gilroy, going out to Salinas for shopping. That's what we're dealing with, and we need to try to encompass some of that income to stay here. You know, but we need all sorts of housing, all sorts of economic development, and provide, less hurdles for a current business to be able to grow. You know, because that's my big thing. We need to not only encompass this, like, define areas, but we also need to make it easier for, local residents to be able to invest in our community. So we can be more an attractive community for investment. So that, that's, where I want to, but great conversations, great to see all these maps, Atkinson's, right opportunity, when this is the right opportunity. But let's get more feedback. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody because this is a big crowd. I've been doing this for a little bit, not for years and years, and I'm really very happy to see everyone here. And boy, the diversity of opinion was amazing. So wherever I went, to whatever table, there was always something bringing up great questions, and I filed them away. My biggest takeaway from today is, well, it's multiple. So I appreciate staff and the folks that are working with our staff. You identified all the places in Watsonville, the challenges and the opportunities were right on, and the public brought more of those to light in their perspective. So that's what we're here for. The city of Watsonville that I have lived my entire life in, and okay, I'm admitting it publicly, published and taught, 61 years of my life. And has changed dramatically during that time. And I was having a great conversation with a nice lady whose husband went to school with my aunts and uncles at Watsonville High. And we're talking about, exactly what Councilman Montesino said, is that we need economic development. We need, Ford's department store, how long has it been gone? 30 years? And I still wish for that store every single day because it gave us something here that we couldn't find. We have to go to other cities to find. And so economic development, housing is always important, but I'm going to tell you right now, economic development is the biggest takeaway I am hearing and I am receiving from our conversation, because I don't want to turn into just another bedroom community, and that's exactly what we look like we're doing, and everybody spends money other places. We have great needs for the people of our city, and the only way we can support that is to have revenue, and the only way we get revenue is to have economic development. And I think the people of Watsonville, when we put things up for referendum, might have a different perspective than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And they should, because we change. And it was really good hearing that diversity of opinion and greatly appreciate it. We have agencies that we interact with, like LAFCO, that can make or break our annexation request, whether the people of Watsonville are pro or con on something. It doesn't happen if LAFCO decides to put, blockages in the way. So it's a different LAFCO now. And that's positive for me too, in moving forward with some of these things. And I'm a big believer in letting the people vote. I'm just gonna say it so people know that when we put these things up for the city of Watsonville to react, as long as it goes along with what we talked about with education, everybody gets to be educated. We can't stay the same. My mom just passed this year. She was 100 years old and lived here, born in Pajaro, her entire life. And so things changed during that time. Big changes to Watsonville, notwithstanding, the 6,000 or 3,000 people there, and now they upwards of 60,000. So I agree 100% with Councilman Clark about the infrastructure. I know our representative, and we were so stressed about it in the beginning, but it's been one of our godsends to have Zoe Lofgren be our representative for the city of Watsonville. She's connected our staff, so our public works staff is is connected with some major bills that are going through Congress right now to see if those grants can be a part of it, because otherwise, I mean, we're talking tens of millions of dollars. If we can't support 100 toilets, how are we gonna support 200 more toilets? And I know it's a basic thing, but it's what we do. So it's important, and she's been instrumental in that, so that's another takeaway in the whole discussion. It's kind of like, another filter that's a part of it. And I think
Good morning. Thank you all so much for coming. If you saw me, I made a beeline for the airport table and I hung out there for majority of the time. But I am excited. I did get a chance to go to almost every other location. I think the conversation around Buena Vista and the conversation around the crosswind runway, shortening it versus closing it, is one of the most critical conversations we're going to be having about our plan into the future. What I was most impressed with was just how much every single person here cares about Watsonville and cares about respectfully engaging with one another. I saw people with very different positions and opinions being able to truly and meaningfully engage, not talking over each other, really trying to listen. And that's just an important skill set. That's not a real key takeaway, but it is for this group that you're here today, that you're engaging in such a respectful way, and I really appreciate that this group is able to engage in that kind of dialogue. To me, I heard from a lot of different people. I heard passion around aviation and safety. I also heard that housing is a human right, and we need housing at all levels. We need low-income housing, we need single-family homes. We are landlocked to 6 miles in Watsonville. We cannot annex without referenda. And so the Buena Vista area is one of the most exciting developments that we could have. I am a millennial, I'm a new mother. I also have a single family home, but I want those options for other people in my generation. So I'm not saying that single family homes are the end all be all, but that is the only realistic area where we can even potentially have that. And low income housing and high density housing. I was very excited about the downtown plan. We have just developed a downtown specific plan meant to revitalize downtown. And so really dovetailing on economic development, how can we attract businesses downtown and make the planning process as painless as possible? We are hearing from small business owners, large business owners, corporations, that it is difficult to get through our planning process. So how do we dovetail? How do we streamline it? How can we explain it? Can we have an ombudsman for our small businesses that want to get through the planning department? Can we have one person that they can contact? Some sort of ability for our development, because we need economic development here. And I completely agree with the infrastructure comments. They are different departments, but they do dovetail. How are we going to be able to do the process on our power grid, for example, the process with our sewage and water? What does that look like? Dovetailing with those different departments. I was interested to hear more about the East Lake development, and I would also like to hear of the actual unit difference between closing and shortening the crosswind runway. Like if we could have those two maps, the differences between the two, because that really may guide the discussion about the specificity of units that we can have there. I really liked the freeway corridor. To really try and bring people into Watsonville. It's 3 exits off the freeway. So what are we doing with that space? I enjoyed listening to that and thinking a little bit more about what we can do to bring people here. Can we really sell our farmers markets? Can we really highlight our agricultural community as a destination location? Because people will travel for good farmers markets. And so what can we do to pair with our agricultural community and really showcase and highlight their crops? So thank you very much. Thank you, community. I really appreciate it.
And just so I don't forget, there was also a pretty good discussion around workforce housing and what the potential is up for that. I know we've started the conversation a while back, but it's got brought up today as well. And the other piece, as far as economic development, is a a need for have it more experience focused versus big box buildings. So that's something that I did here today. And of course is bringing family entertainment to town. So what can we do to ensure that that can be part of the economic development plan? That we have something for our families to enjoy, right, within town without having to travel elsewhere.
I'm gonna keep my comments pretty brief because my colleagues have pretty much said everything I wanted to say. But I do want to highlight that we have a very thriving arts community, and we need to make space for our arts community. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is it sounds like to me that we are all on the same page. The public, the council, staff, we are all on the same page in wanting economic development. That is the biggest highlight that I hear. We want to stay and shop where we live. We want to do things where we live. And I think that there is, one of the questions that I heard was, how do you determine what businesses come in, right? And there's a whole process, and I think that sometimes the public does not have a clear understanding of that process. And I think that we need to make that process on how a Starbucks comes in or how a new business comes in. What does that process look like? What are the steps, and how do we get from that point to having the business here? And I think also, what are we doing to attract those businesses? That's something that I heard consistently council members say, is that we need to attract more businesses. Listen, I would love to have an In-N-Out. I would be there every weekend. So how do we get them here, right? So I think more clarity on that is really needed for the public and for council ourselves. You know, we want to know, how do we do it? Let's make a plan. Any other comments from council? Right, I'll turn it back to you, Susan.
So, great conversation. I think I captured most of it. We're also taking more detailed notes on the laptop, so we'll have a good, robust documentation. Any questions or comments that arose that you didn't get answered that you'd like to ask any of the project team or staff?
You guys will answer questions.
We will answer
I
questions.
feel like we're just talking at you, so.
Talking at us is good too. This is really important to capture your sentiment from the conversation, but we're also here to answer questions.
I have a couple questions. I think the mayor just.
Hello?
Good.
Oh, okay. I just was talking about what do we do about economic development? How do we move forward? And, I think we need to hire somebody to just focus on that. And I feel like a lot of times, we do a lot of these sessions where we're sitting here talking in circles with ourselves, and we don't move forward with what we need to do to achieve those goals. So we need someone focused specifically on bringing in businesses to our community. I'm sure all 7 of us hear this from everybody, that economic development is one of the top things that we hear from everybody. They want to spend their money locally. And we are, and I think also what the mayor said too about the education of how businesses come into our community. During COVID, I did a meeting online about, because people were complaining about this a lot, and only like 1 or 2 people showed up to it. So, but everybody gets on Nextdoor and starts spreading information that's not even true. I don't even respond to it because then I get argued. They'll argue that, the point is wrong. So how do we actually educate them on how businesses come in? Because if you meet the standards to bring a business into our community, you can bring your business into the community. So, and people don't understand that. Oh, the city council, they brought in 7 Starbucks. Well, no, we don't usually vote on the Starbucks, but come business at Starbucks, what they see here, they see dollars. And if you drive by any of these businesses, the lines are really, really long. I don't even drink coffee, but I like their breakfast. And the other day I got in the Watsonville line, and I was like, oh damn, there's like 12 cars in front of me. And then I couldn't back out, there's 2 cars behind me. I sat there for 30 minutes. It's like, just for the breakfast. So,
Thank you for clarifying.
yeah. But so I'm saying is that like I think we have to do a better job of educating people on how businesses are able to come into our community. We need to hire somebody to, do this. We need to do it soon. We can't, like, I don't wanna talk about this in 6 months, like, how do we work on economic development? We're telling you today, hire somebody, bring in a team that's gonna focus on this. Because, I mean, in 6 months, it's not gonna, what's the point at that point? And I also wanna say too about the general plan. We've been working on the 2005 general plan for the 10 years I've been here. And, I think that, it's also, that plan's been thrown in our face a lot, and it prevents us from actually growing in certain areas. So, I think that if we had better collaboration, I talked about this earlier, with like the Pilots Association, the farmers, like, we live here, we need these things. If you work with us, we're not gonna push back. But it's like, let's work together to make sure we're able to offer our community, which a lot of people probably don't live here in Watsonville that are having a big voice in it. We matter. We matter here in Watsonville. We deserve all this. So we need to figure out how we're gonna get there.
Quick question for Renee. We have a consultant for economic development, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We have, so they've been coordinating with the plan consultant as well. So yes, to the mayor, council members, we do have a consultant on sort of more of the action steps on the economic development plan. There's the general plan effort is also looking at the opportunities, like you saw some of the growth scenarios here. Almost all scenarios have economic impact, good impact, right? So we have to work through those. It's coming to you the second meeting in February.
That was my next question.
So the second meeting in February, you're gonna get a plan, you're gonna get a recommendation for resources, and kind of moving forward, we're gonna need the authority to, the appropriation and the spending and the positions and all that. So all of that's coming to you the second meeting in February, which I believe is February 27th. That's when it's scheduled to come before you, right?
Thank you. I just didn't want to, did I imagine all that, or, and I want to second what many people up here have said so far, the collaboration. Like Councilmember Salcido, I spent a lot of time at the airport table. I will call it the spicy table. But there was a lot of really, really good conversation that happened there. And as Councilmember Salcido said, nobody was talking over each other. We were communicating with each other. That is something that's lacking these days, just approach us, talk to us. We are open to everything. We are here to represent you. And seeing all these people here today kind of shocks me, excites me, and I'm happy for this, but thank you for coming. So,
Just letting you, the council know and everybody and a lot of folks here, we have been meeting with large portions of the urban community and as well as other communities to go over the alternative discussions, what are the options, clearly based on what the council directed us a few months ago to bring back. That's on schedule for March. With the first meeting in March, we're not going to be able to have a quorum, so we're going to have to, push that to the next meeting. Because I think some of the council members, we're going to be in DC, again, talking to Congressman Lofgren, Senator Padilla, because they have been, as our Councilmember Parker suggested, that Congressman Lofgren has been a really big friend to the city, and she's pushing our projects and their funding forward. She needs to get this, it's always good to be there to advocate. So, but just want to shout out that we've had a couple of meetings for the airport, several groups at the airport. And we're discussing it and we're having the conversations. We're trying to understand perspectives and, the safety issues, the growth issues, the trade-offs, the balances between economic development and housing of all types. So all those conversations are happening. And I think that hopefully by the time we get here in March, we have a lot more alternatives and a lot more information for you to make a real informed decision.
I just have one more question. How can we, this is where I don't understand is, how can San Jose International Airport build a soccer stadium basically on top of it, and we can't even build a locker facility storage That's what I wanted to know, like, I sit there and I think about these things, I'm well traveled, and I see around airports, they're built up, but Watsonville's like, you know, don't do anything. I wanna know why, can someone answer that today?
Miranda, do you have any thoughts on that? Not exactly that specific, but.
That's a good question. I don't know exactly where the stadium is next to San Jose International Airport, but but I can tell you that there is a difference between the types of aircraft operating at a GA airport versus a commercial airport. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I felt the same thing too.
Okay. And so, you know, what we can do is look to the Caltrans handbook for guidance on the intensities allowed within a vicinity of the airport. What I can say is that along the extended runway center line, those are the higher risk areas, and we try to avoid high intensity uses. But you can have more intensive uses lateral to the runways. And so that, you know, you can have more assembly type uses in what we call safety zone 6. For commercial airports, that zone does not exist. And so that's probably what you're witnessing at San Jose and other commercial airports where there's urban development, very intensive uses. San Diego is one that comes to mind. There's, you know, all the high rises right along the approach to that particular airport. So each airport is unique. The community is unique. How it's the development around the airports are unique. So you have to consider all of those different factors when planning future development.
But great question. I will tell you that we are, through our airport manager, as well as our CDD team, we are engaging with Caltrans division in the land use plan. So we hope to have all that information to you in March. So I think there's a meeting planned in Sacramento to go get a lot more information in the space and, you know, what can and can't we do and understand that, because it's the Caltrans side that's on the land use planning side of the house when it comes to our airports in California. So that's what we're working with there.
So let's take a quick break. So we've kind of wrapped up the first half of the morning or the meeting today, and that was really focused on all these different opportunity areas, planning areas. When we come back, we want to talk about some growth scenarios. How do some of these get packaged together? And looking at how do we look at growth down the road. And so we'll come back and do a short presentation there and do something similar. Well, then you'll have a chance to go talk and coordinate and collaborate with the community as well as each other.
Can I just add one comment?
Of course.
10 seconds. So as we're looking at just this conversation, we want to keep in mind also the well-being of the community. So it's very important to keep public safety in mind, open space and parks, and of course ensuring that we continue to strengthen the partnerships we have with our service providers. I think all of those indirectly impact economic development, right? If crime is down, we may attract more businesses, even if it's just perceived crime. So, anyway, thank you.
Perfect. So let's take 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
Let's reconvene at 11.
Reconvene at 11. So there's coffee, there's water, grab a quick snack, bathroom break, and then we'll meet back at 11. And just a reminder of the flow for the rest of the meeting today. We're going to do a short presentation on the growth scenarios, and then we're going to break into smaller groups again. It'll be a little bit different format than earlier because we'll have all of the scenarios at the tables for the same discussion. So the tables will be similar. There will be different topics at the table. You're still welcome to bounce around from table to table to hear different conversations, but the content will be the same at the tables. All right, looks like everyone's still finding their way to their seat. I will turn the floor over to Justin in just a second here once we get everyone seated.
All right.
All right, that's good.
Everyone ready for the unveiling the growth scenarios. Let's begin. So we've heard a lot about today is not only learn how to grow over the next 20, 25, 30 years. That's what we're calling the plan. General 2050 plan. We're looking at what kind of form of development that is possible. We're talking about in terms of housing, we're talking about single family, multifamily, what are the kinds of mix of uses to really make for active commercial corridors down, how that helps foster reinvestment in economic development. Topic conversation has come up a lot, being the needs of today, but also into the future. Are there other key factors that we haven't considered that we want to make sure that are front and center in this conversation? And what are the trade-offs? There are competing objectives embodied in discussion we've had today and that will be presented as part of these different growth scenarios. Bear in mind that there are certain things that any scenario has to meet, and there should state laws around housing and other considerations that will be part of the general plan. But mainly we're focusing on future projected needs and how to accomplish those in these categories. So we run through briefly the individual scenarios that have been presented before and then take a little bit of each. Scenario one includes growth in the area, what we call the area C, beyond Atkinson Lane area. In this scenario, as you see in subsequent scenarios, there is the expectation for a certain amount of infill development, particularly downtown and some other corridors, as well as the need for economic development around Highway 1 and create a better gateway into the community. This scenario does involve shortening the crosswind one-way with the intent to unlock more development potential on freedom. It does not involve consideration for new growth area around Buena Vista. Unlike scenario two, which assumes the closure of the crosswind runway to not only allow for more development along Buena Vista, but also freedom. Similar in this scenario is the same sort of expectations around growth as infill in downtown, corridors, and around the gateway. In scenario three would involve the closure of the airport outright, which also has the intended consequence of allowing for development around Buena Vista as well. So these are three main scenarios just to help have a conversation about what are the, based on the strengths and weaknesses of the discussion so far, how the community might grow to accommodate economic development and housing need both in and beyond city's current boundaries. Looking at scenario one again, the main focus here is that under this scenario, you're not constrained by airport safety zones and the land use limitations that imposes. It does involve shortening the crosswind runway close to 1,600 feet, largely to unlock development potential along the freedom corridor. As with this and other scenarios, looking to provide much more economic development around the highway with both visitor serving and other kinds of commercial development for jobs and revenue purposes. This one involves a range of multifamily housing, both as infill, but also in the growth area of C, which provides a broader range. But also, as you'll see in the layout on the table over here, taking into consideration of the floodplain. So as part of this would be to have open space or parkland that could serve dual purpose of retention of floodwaters if they were to occur and help provide protection that doesn't exist today. Scenario two, by contrast, still involves operating an airport, but it wouldn't mean, because most of the takeoff and landings and activity is on the primary runway, given that the crosswind runway is considered by FAA to be an additional, not a crosswind, and it's not subject to funding. This scenario assumes the closure of the crosswind, which would also allow for development in all of the state area. Like Area C, it provides a broader range of housing options that could occur, both single family to multifamily type in a new neighborhood that could fit into the existing pattern of development in that area. It also means it reduces development potential pressure in other parts of the community, such as farmland near Area C, and And with any subdivision, there's opportunity to provide more needed parkland. Scenario 3 it involves the full closure of the airport. This is a more long-term scenario. It would open up the possibility for doing a new master plan community that can help stitch together both the Buena Vista side, Freedom side, beyond the airport, as well as existing neighborhoods near Airport Boulevard into a new master plan community that could have a range of activities, a range of uses, everything from housing to jobs to parkland, maybe some retail that would be potentially laid out as part of it. As we know before, there are challenges and opportunities with that scenario. This also helps to help reducing development pressure in some on ag land, such as Area C, although again, this is more long-term scenario. In terms of numbers that we want to be mindful of, I heard many from the public today talk about what are the projections for today, what are we planning for in terms of housing in the future. So here's a slide on the numbers. Let me just walk you through it real quick. The first row shows population projections that AMBAG has prepared for growth through the 2045 timeframe. That's what they're planning for right now. These are largely based off of demographic trends that has been seen in recent past and projected into the future. You'll note that the number of residential units is not very great. That also reflects on the demographic trends that they're seeing in terms of not only in Watsonville, but the wider region, an aging population, a decrease in household formation. And so this projection shows a very gentle increase in population growth. You know, the next line is the RENA figure that the city of Watsonville is required to plan for. And so one of the things that we want to bear in mind is that not only Watsonville, but all the jurisdictions in the AMAG regions have seen roughly a threefold increase in the number of housing units that are needed in our individual jurisdictions. So for example, the county is planning for over 4,000, the city of Santa Cruz is planning for over 3,000, Watsonville is planning for about 2,000. And that's over the next 8-year cycle. So the housing on the cycles is by 8 years. So you can imagine the general plan cycle might encompass 2 to 3 housing on the cycles. But in this next 8 years, this is what the state has assigned to our region, or our jurisdiction, to try to accommodate. The good news is, as we talked about previously at other meetings, is that a lot of the advanced planning work as part of the downtown specific plan can accommodate a fair amount of that in the near and medium term. But over the long term, there may be need for growth areas to be able to demonstrate we can accommodate future housing. And so when we look at the number that we're including here for, let's include the general plan, you can see it's roughly 3 times what the AMBAG trends are, because we're planning for more housing, because there's a capacity in the specific plan and the need for more housing. So just to help walk you through those numbers. And so as we look at these various growth scenarios, you'll see a range of numbers just to give you a relative scale of what might be possible over the long term in any one of these. Again, you'll see that we expect the same development capacity for downtown in all 3. I'll just start by saying that. A modest amount of development along some of our corridors and neighborhoods. And so over time, a significant portion of particularly housing, as well as economic development, would be in our growth areas, whether it's Area C for housing largely, and along the gateway in terms of non-residential commercial type development. Similar in scenario 2, if the opportunity doesn't arise for developing Area C and having that as an annexation area, you'd be looking at a similar number of housing units that possibly could go in the Buena Vista area, especially with it no longer be constrained with airport safety zones in large portions of it. The same overall development potential as I noted before. We're expecting or recommending the inclusion of the highway gateway in all 3 scenarios, so that's why you see some of those numbers consistent throughout. One thing to note is under the scenario, there is a slightly greater number of infill potential along the Freedom Corridor with the closure of the crossway. And then scenario 3, one key takeaway here is that while we're showing the closure of the airport as this scenario, this is a truly long-term process. And so we're not showing any development potential as of right now in the airport itself. This would set up the community over the long term to be able to see that area redeveloped in the future. And so that's explains why you're seeing the same numbers of 0 throughout the airport, but also one of those numbers similarly be unlocked under this scenario as well. So this is, you want to run through these different scenarios here. What are the assumptions behind them? We also have set up a series of tables. Students are going to walk us through that in just a moment to allow for, again, a similar interactive table discussion on the pros and cons, people's thoughts and feelings on all these scenarios that are at consideration. These are, of course, not hard and fast, but these are to help have an informed discussion around what options are available that we're thinking about today.
Do we want to take a couple minutes first for questions from the council before we break into the tabletop sessions?
Quick question about Area C. With Reach 6 happening on the Corliss Creek, does that make that more habitable? I know we cannot predict the future, but I mean, I look at that and it's been brought up a few times with, you know, this area floods. I could see it being an environment kind of like the villages in District 7, because those were built up against a levee as well. So is that a concern that the city has, or are we looking, I mean, that's a large piece of area, you know, and so for just, I mean, all residential or?
Yeah, so primarily that, and one of the illustrations on one of the maps we had for Area C helps show a layout of what that could look like. And let me just walk you through that a little bit. So you notice there's two colors, brown and green.
Yes, the brown and the green, yeah.
The green largely overlaps with the 100-year floodplain.
Yes.
And so we already are taking into consideration of trying to help protect the community, both that we propose and existing, and using that as open space or parkland that can also serve the dual purpose of being able to retain floodwaters. So to your question about flood protection, yes, the Army Corps of Engineers is working on doing levee improvements. The schedule that Prickmont has is to start work in June or July of this year. And that the intent there is to return that area to a 100-year floodplain protection, which means anything beyond that could potentially still flood.
Okay, so Area C, the green area is essentially just a buffer.
You conserve as a
Between
buffer,
residential
and
and
open space and
okay.
community parklands.
Or, yeah, okay, perfect, thank you.
I want to stick on C as well. I also, how do you put, I would not support this if it was high density. So how do we make sure that if we're gonna use a piece of ag land like this, that it stays single family residential? Like, can we do that? Can we zone this so that it has to be residential only and not high density?
It's a good question. So the scenario that we have right now shows a lot of new single family development that is possible in this area, along with, you know, small lot developments, some duplex style housing that fits nicely into existing neighborhoods, and more of like a sort of almost a little town village kind of center with some more medium density apartment size. So the intent here is not to put all high density housing, but a range. I would just mention that with any housing scenario for the future, and think in terms of our housing element, one key factor is to make sure that the city plans for accommodating a range of housing type. If, for example, the city were to propose new housing that's only single family, that would, we would get comments from the state.
Well, we haven't built single family in like a decade, so I don't see that really moving forward in a lot of areas because it's so tight, you know. A lot of these infill are gonna be high density projects. So I think if we have a space like this, we should make sure it's gonna be put to its best use. And to me, that's what the best use for that, because I mean, just go down Atkinson Lane, we've already built 3 low-income and very low-income, high-density projects. So I think if we're gonna have an opportunity to build residential housing, how do we, I wanna make sure we can secure that as that zone for that. That's just my opinion, and I don't know how anyone else feels about that. And then my other point is, to me, my other big concern here, and something that's gonna be really important to me, is the development of the Freedom Boulevard area. I wanna make sure that it's not gonna, whatever I'm gonna support is I'm gonna make sure that Freedom Boulevard is gonna be able to be developed to its fullest capacity. We just voted to bring in enterprise, which I'm happy that a business is doing that, but we were restricted on what kind of business we could put on that corridor. That is a main vein in our community, and we are being prohibited from putting businesses in there that can really benefit this community. So I'm only gonna be looking at scenarios that are gonna allow for us to build on Freedom Boulevard, and also the potential of the Kmart area in the future, whether housing, mixed use, because that is the direction that our city has to go. And when we are being not able to develop the areas that are meant to have businesses, I don't know what we're supposed to do, you know? So we have to be supporting one of the options that's gonna allow us to develop. So that'll be further discussion.
Hello. My own? Okay, good. Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Dutra, that's the same thing, because it goes back to the questions or concerns we had at the very beginning, which are zoning issues across the city. And I know we are the body that can change a lot of those zoning issues, but hammering them out when we look at something like this. I agree about the high density because, you know, Vista Montaña in my district, we've lived with it for many years now, so that's intense. And the families that live there as well. So I feel very strongly about what Councilman Dutra said about giving us an opportunity. I also hear you, Justin Meeks, when you say the state, because we've already been held accountable and basically blackmailed by the state that said if you don't follow these things, we're gonna stop giving you money altogether. And it has to do with land use when it comes to how we put in our ADUs, because even if we did single family homes, right? They could put ADUs in the backyard, and of course it creates more density and the same thing. And I know how it's affecting my district, because not that we don't need it, but it's becoming high density where it wasn't before. And even if we tried to design that, because the state is requiring these things, is that correct? Yeah, and we do basically get financially blackmailed by them, is that correct too?
I think it depends on if you're talking about transportation dollars or.
I'm talking about any kind of money that they say they'll stop giving us if we don't do what they tell us to do. So they take away our local control, right?
That has been going on year in and year out, particularly since the 2016 timeframe.
Yeah, and so especially when it comes to housing, that's where our CDD department has really been impacted, right? And what you can approve, what you bring to us, because we have to say yes. And I know you brought it to us, and we were all going to vote no, we can't do. You can't make it. Yeah, you can make us, I guess. And that was eye-opening for council, and the general public doesn't realize that. Because I know how much blame I got for, having to move some things forward. So I think education on some of these issues when we do it, but I'm in agreement, I'm not for high density housing. Because in my own district, I've seen how it's worked out, and it's rough. And hopefully God, we never have a pandemic again, but during the pandemic, the high density issues that we had were just being packed during that time. What was problematic. And I lost track with the thought, you were asking us a question, if we had any questions or concerns.
Why don't you just see if there's any clarification needed on
Okay,
anything
clarification.
before we break
So
it
that, yeah, so that clarifies it. I hope the public can understand my meanderings on that one a little bit more with ADUs and with what we plan and what the state decides. And in fact, I don't understand that. And I think maybe a lot of council members are feeling the same way, because a lot of what the state has done, or I should ask this in the form of a question, hasn't been a lot of what the state has done really focused on other cities, not necessarily the profile of what Watsonville is?
I think it's a fair statement.
Yeah.
When the state passes laws that change ADU laws, anti-bonus laws, housing laws in general, it affects all jurisdictions. They don't necessarily have a community like Watsonville in mind. Sometimes they are trying things that are based on their experiences in other places, where we're talking about San Francisco, with garage conversions, to San Diego with ADUs and lot splits, or LA with other programs. When they adopt it as a statute, it applies universally to all jurisdictions.
So this general plan update is.
It's on here.
This general plan update is a big opportunity in the following way. As Justin said, since 2016, state laws have been snowballing and taking more and more local control, because the housing is a statewide emergency in a lot of ways. And a lot of cities have been kicking the can down the road, not including you folks. But the latest state laws have said to developers who are willing to develop affordable housing that they're allowed basically to ignore a lot of the city's zoning requirements. So basically, and I had a brief conversation with the director of housing of the state's HCD department at the APA convention Justin and I were at, actually, in Fresno. And said, you know, what's up with this? That we've been working very hard to make plans that design walkable, mixed income, mixed density, mixed type, equitable neighborhoods. And now the state law is basically sort of wiping a lot of that out. And what she said is that if the clarity about the types of housing, the types of street networks, the type of walkability and livability that you want in your neighborhoods, if that's all clear in the general plan, you can enforce it. So to some extent, the general plan is the new zoning. So, I mean, obviously at the end of this general plan update process, the zoning is going to be updated for sure. But a lot of the clarity about what types of housing, what types of neighborhoods, what kinds of walkable streets, what kinds of neighborhood centers that you can walk to or ride your bike to from your house. A lot of that clarity needs to be in the general plan so that you can keep your local control. So that's one of the things this plan can do for you.
So I just want to be cognizant of time to make sure we have enough time to do our breakout. So just a couple more questions real quick.
I'm going to pass these. Is it okay, Mayor? Okay. So we need to update our general plan a little bit faster, quicker, more often than, I'm just listening to what he's saying. If that's what the state is going to stand as our only defense, we can't wait, 30 years, 10 years, or even maybe 5 in between.
How about like?
Yes, no, I understand. Now, I'm talking about after this one. Okay.
I just wanted to return briefly to the draft development potential map. So these numbers reflect your RENA numbers, is that correct? No. So on scenario 2 and scenario 3, we do not have area C's numbers added. It's only scenario 1. Why is area C not in scenario 2 and 3?
It's just for compare and contrast. And so in this scenario, we're assuming there's an opportunity for annexation and development in area C, but not in scenario 2, just to differentiate between the two. That's not to say that you couldn't choose to have both.
Yes, so I just want to clarify, because that is a very important point to me. Looking at this, you would think that shortening the runway versus closing it would result in the same amount of potential residential homes, but that's not accurate. If I add area C plus the 1320, my total is 2,988 potentials for a grand total of 8,968 in scenario 2. Is that correct?
If both were to be developed, yes.
Right, so I'm trying to answer the question that I had earlier.
One bear in mind, there's the ease of development is a little bit different. So if you notice, one of the bullet points there is we're assuming that in one of this, only 30% is built out. in large part to reflect that it's a little bit more challenging to build in that area. So not even 100% of that area is, we're anticipating would be built in that time frame.
But all things being equal, if you add the Buena Vista plus Area C, that is a net of 2,988. Okay, that answers my question, because someone looking at this might think, oh, that's the same, the scenario produces the same amount of housing, but truly scenario 2 produces the most opportunity for housing. Thank you.
And then the corridor number in scenario 2 is a bigger number because of the freedom.
The corridor number in scenario 2 is larger also because of the shortened roadway.
Thank you.
So it looks like one more question,
This is just one. I mean, there's dozens of scenarios. These are just 3.
So when you get to the tables and start have conversations, you can also talk about mixing and matching and adding and those sorts of things as well.
Right, so Crystal asked a question I had
There's some different ways to get them.
in regards to including Area C, so thank you, Crystal, for bringing that up. The other quick question that I have, because it was also brought up by members of the public, is if we go back to scenario 1, they asked a great question. I didn't quite have an answer to it. But they said, well, you know, there's area around the Buena Vista area, around the safety zone there. Why is it that we cannot build there? What's preventing us from building around that safety zone on scenario 1? So if you can answer that for me.
Sure. So it's a little bit hard to see in this scale. We have other graphics to help articulate it. But you see those shapes that come up? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You see how there's that sort of rectangular and pie shapes? Those represent safety zones 1 through 5. And safety zones 1 through 5, the amount of residential development that's allowed is on the range of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 acres, which means that you're not going to get a subdivision in something that's allowed on that scale. So in essence, it precludes any housing development to go into that area. Now, if you look at the handbook and you look at safety zone 6, it differentiates between those other zones. Those zones are in areas where there's a greater likelihood for plane crashes, and that's why they consider more risky. In 6, where it's more like a traffic pattern zone, it's less likely for an accident, and so the associated limitations are less. So there's no limitations on residential development in zone 6 as opposed to the zones 1 and 5.
Great, thank you. Really helpful.
I think this is our last
Question from council.
Well, it's not really a question. I just, really want to bring it back as a reality check. We're talking about housing numbers, but we're forgetting a lot of us that are sitting here in the background have housing. I represent a lot of our communities that are bunched up. And that's, I think, what the missing link, from what I keep hearing, like, oh, there's opportunities, we're being pushed out. There's 3 family households per unit now. The impact of that in resources is infrastructure. Talk about toilet.
Yeah.
Police, fire. All of it, all of that impact. So, that's what like I said, just a reality check. That's what we're talking about, not just units, it's families, kids, opportunities for education in schools, all of that.
That's a great point to end the question piece on and to move into some more dialogue with each other and with the community members. So as Justin said, we're going to do something similar. We're going to break. All the content at the tables is the same this time, so you don't have to move, but you certainly can if you want to change conversations and listen to other folks. But what's at the table are the last several slides that you saw. So each of the different scenarios and the 3 scenarios together. So what we'd like you to do is have some conversations about give and take, what are some pros and cons, and maybe even to the point of one of the council members, repackaging some of those. So have at it. There's Post-it notes and there's notepads there as well, and we also have our team here for questions. So let's take about 20 minutes.
And before we go, I just want to take 30 seconds to clarify 2 points that I heard from council members here on some of these numbers. And I think it's important to reiterate. One, the housing number, part of the reason why that number is 3 times larger than last time is not only projected demand, but existing need. And in large part, that's because of overcrowding. Secondly, when you look at the figure, the 5980, I just want to clarify, those scenarios that we saw were different ways to get to that number. You know, what kind of capacity? So I just want to help draw together why you see those numbers and how it translates into those scenarios. With that, let's break out and have.
So we'll take about 20 minutes and come back.
Some things to do with those things, I was thinking.
Council, if you have anyone who's ready to make their comments?
I'm a shy guy.
As I say, to capture from the earlier discussion, there were a couple kind of directional pieces, so I tried to capture those on the chart here. Limiting high density in area C and ensuring the full potential of freedom as being two kind of key criteria for a couple of them.
Can you provide the scenarios just on brain thought process?
Someone took his papers.
Someone do my. I mean, my preference, you thought about preference is scenario 2 with an added of potential for area C that we should be looking at. Because that provides us more latitude to be able to grow. I know the challenges with everything in life, you know. We just got to be able to provide some, you know, some needed bring some open space for us, bring for economic development, which is you know, we're aligned, and housing and stock opportunities to be able to provide for our community. You know, we like I said, I just talked about how we're overcrowded and 2 to 3 families per unit. But a lot of people have been moved out of this community. They're, you know, they're going back to Los Baños again. People are going back to, you know, all the way to Greenfield, you know, Soledad, you know, because there's not, you know, availability here. You know, there's nothing for sale, there's nothing to rent, there's nothing to lease. So that's my preference.
Thank you. I just want to say, first of all, I had really nice conversations with a lot of people out there right now. I was hiding from you earlier, but thanks. I'm just kidding. But I did have some really wonderful conversations, and I do feel from actually the people that I did speak with that were attached to the airport in some way, that there is this desire to work together to, you know, meet the needs of Watsonville. And it was nice to hear that because I had not really had those conversations in the past. Actually, a lot of you I just met for the first time. So I think that, you know, we're looking here for 2050. I don't think we should even have a scenario of closing the airport. I think that it is definitely an institution in our community that we need to keep. But I think however we move forward, we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our community. So I have a question on the around the train area. I mean, the red, is that going to be, yes. So is that going to be changed to commercial, residential, or what's the conversation around that?
Good question. So with any area that we might consider transit-oriented, TOD, there's a mixture of a range of uses that could be appropriate to take advantage of a high-quality transit option. And so were the station to open in this area, we would want to look at some station area planning. And as part of this general plan, we're considering what would be the appropriate mix of uses that can go in there. That can be everything from adaptive reuse to perhaps some transition, so taking existing structures and allowing for different economic activity to go in, to looking at some of the nearby areas that could become more housing, that again can have people that can live nearby to transit more jobs too. So there's a range of things that could likely go in as more of an infill scenario that better takes advantage of a high quality transit option.
Have you had and I'm really thankful for all the people that came out today representing the airport today. But I think that this should probably be also an in-depth conversation with the people working in the industrial area, because I think, seeing what their feelings are with losing industrial space to, what we're possibly going to rezone it to. So has that conversation even happened, or is that something that we're thinking about having?
Well, this is not the first time that we've had this conversation. I know we've been talking a lot about the airport and Area C. We've also shared information on this as a potential TOD type development area, and so I'm glad that we're having a conversation around it. So I think further discussion around it, what's appropriate, what would be preferred, we can have more on that as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my final point is around Area C. This is borders myself and Councilmember Parker's district, and I know for myself, and I would imagine she said something earlier as well, that we definitely want to make sure that we can do non-dense projects in that area. I just only really want to support a scenario where we can build single-family homes in that area. So I don't know if that's a further conversation we need to have. Susie, if that's like something that, is possible. To how we would have to zone that in order to make sure that we're not putting in high density, tall buildings. And when we talk about future high density, is that also six floors? What's the height that they can go to build these high density buildings nowadays?
That's entirely up to the city to determine. And so in terms of the height, the density, these are things that are still within the city's jurisdiction. Understanding that there is something called density bonus law that can be taken advantage of. But it's within the city's purview to set those standards. But also bearing in mind that if we don't plan enough for accommodating housings, we may have to make some adjustments to the housing development cycle.
So what is that? You just said there was the density, there's I guess already an ordinance, a state ordinance, that states how high you can go?
There's a density bonus law.
Yes.
It's been in existence for some time. It's been amended in recent years to allow more flexibility, particularly by those that propose a community benefit of providing more affordable units. And so it provides a range of options that those developers could select from for adding height, adding the number of units to any housing project beyond what is allowed in current zoning or general plan land use designation.
Okay, because I know we've talked about that in the past, and Councilmember Orozco brought up earlier today, which I've been bringing up for many years, to make sure that people that are from Watsonville and live in Watsonville are able to get housing in Watsonville. And and someone asked earlier, why are these, people being pulled from other areas to come and live in Watsonville? It's because of where the funding comes from. So if the Santa Cruz County Housing, what is it called? The Housing Authority puts money in, then we're going to be going off of their lists, and they're going to get a certain allotted amount of units. Am I correct?
When there's state funding involved, it can't preclude people from outside the city from being eligible for that housing. That's right.
So that's where we as a council have to start asking those questions. Where is this funding coming from to build these housing? And and that's where we're gonna have more control of who comes into Watsonville, is where that funding comes from. Because when we allow state funding to come in, we are basically saying anyone can come, not just Watsonville people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, let me start. We're looking at 3 scenarios, but we're in the position also to modify the scenarios in our heads and for future conversation. So the scenario where we get rid of the cross, that's scenario 2? Yeah, okay. And that adds the beneficial aspects of the Buena Vista area. So mine isn't really a hybrid. I do not support in any way, shape, or form scenario 3 where we get rid of the airport. I was here during 89 and God knows when 89 the earthquake happens again, because it will, it's a matter of nature. I might be here, I might not, but without that was a telling moment in my life. And so many others. I'm a big supporter of the airport in a lot of ways, but I'm also a supporter of the city of Watsonville and the needs of the people of Watsonville. So I wouldn't not dismiss the idea of closing the crosswind runway, but also lengthening the existing longer runway and putting money into that. I think that has to do with economic development for us, and it really poses a positive future for the airport. I agree with the same focus. We've had wonderful advocates for the airport here, but we don't have our industrial, the very people who are bringing revenue and jobs into the city. We don't have those people in the industrial area here to talk about some of the changes that are envisioned. And we need to have those folks in the room, and we need to have a discussion with them. And that's very important, not in a general way, but in a very detailed discussion about the changes that CDD would envision and bring to council. And if we're in agreement with that, if we see any other changes that we want to add to or not change, because we're already in conflict in many ways in our industrial area. Housing and the zoning and the influence of the state is going to be there no matter what, right? Because it's about money. If we set our standards and the state takes away our ability to keep with our standards and says you must adopt theirs, if we don't, and if we don't, we are punished in some way, usually financially. And the only way that, you can correct me, that you feel like we have a good defense against that would be to have a really focused plan. So the state would then say, oh, well, your plan is tight, you guys are doing a great job, so we're not going to enforce that. I mean, I'm hearing what you say. Have they done it? Have they shown that face to other municipalities?
Let me just briefly tiptoe into the housing element. Much longer conversation.
Yeah, no.
I will just share with you that we are currently in the process of developing the housing element for the city of Watsonville. Other jurisdictions like the Bay Area went through it last year, and so forth. Ours is about ready to go to HCD for their formal review, at which point we'll get comments. There's a long laundry list of programs that are developed as part of it. It's a very complicated document, in large part because of the changes to the law. And it outlines a range of things that we've done, that we think we've done well, but we may need to change. And we may hear more from them on further things that they want to see us do in changing our zoning or development regulations to allow certain types of housing. So I just want to, I can't answer all the specifics right now, but just to let you know that that's something to keep an eye out, and we have a follow-up conversation.
And that's also a changing landscape at the state level, correct?
It is. We haven't gone through it yet in looking at what other communities have gone through and the kind of comments they received from HCD. They have, I think, been very expansive in terms of what they require jurisdictions to do to demonstrate that there's less impediments or to accommodate more housing production.
And not only does Watsonville need workforce housing, we are an agricultural town, we are a worker town, working town. But having and going back to, and I don't know how to do this, housing in Watsonville for people from Watsonville. That we live here, we're packed with 3 families to a household. How do we get those folks into their own, place? And without having to bring more people into the city of Watsonville. So I guess the charge would be for staff, how how can we bring that money without touching the, the housing authority or any other that would constrain us when we have certain projects? I guess it doesn't have to be in all projects, it just has to be in some. So as far as I'm concerned, that's what we need to look at too. So scenario 2 with the addition of C, looks good to me, but that, the other portions, once again, the stakeholders with our industrial area really need to be brought in, and we need, I know as a council person, I would like to have those conversations as well as staff.
Just to respect everyone's time, I just want to, because I want to make sure we can try to get out here right at 12:30. We just need a couple minutes at the end to talk about next steps, so that gives us about 10 more minutes.
Okay, so I will keep it succinct then. So I wholeheartedly want to agree with Councilmember Dutra and Parker in regards to the industrial zone. For me, it's not just about square footage, like if we're taking area away from the industrial zone, but whatever we do there, the impacts. We have a lot of logistics in this town, so traffic patterns. If we put in a housing complex and we, change the sidewalks and the intersections, that's going to majorly impact that industrial zone. In all the scenarios, the industrial zone doesn't expand. So we're looking to expand commercial and residential, but not industrial, right?
That's a topic that we can explore as part of this as well.
Okay, because, it is the economic engine of our town, and without it, I don't think we would survive. So if we're going to look at affecting it, maybe we should grow it as well. Just kind of throw that out there, I want to say thank you for everybody who came here today and had some great conversations. I'm really happy with where things are going, where everybody is having very open, sorry, my brain just shut down. Conversation, I know, I just used that word twice, so. And collaboration, there we go, the other C word. And this makes me very happy, and I see a bright future for everybody in Watsonville. I also want to reiterate the fact that scenario 3 is not anything I would ever consider. So, that's it.
Thank you again for coming. One of the main things that we discussed at our table was, how to keep our new residents for Watsonville. And although there may not be a legal way, like, impacting deeds, there may be other incentivized ways in which we can try and keep people that are now here, from here, to be the ones that benefit from our additional housing at all levels. And how can we creatively think of ways to encourage and develop people to be able to go into that next level of homeownership and what that looks like. Really great conversations around the interaction between the airport itself and the community. What are we doing for outreach there? We keep having conversations around what we're doing with our youth. And although this isn't necessarily a general plan conversation, I thought it was worth really noting that we can do more to bring our youth and our community into the airport. What events are we doing there? How are we developing them? Because the people who are born and raised here, who've been to schools here, there have been so many conversations I've had where they said, I've never gone to the airport. I have no idea what it does. I don't know how it serves our community. I'm from here. They've never gone on a school field trip to the airport. So how are we engaging this huge asset with the community? How are we serving the community with it? What does the outreach look like? What do the events look like? Again, not necessarily here, but a really important vein that we started talking about with my group.
Okay, so yeah, that's a great conversation. I am leaning towards scenario 2. And I was sharing with the table that at least for me, when I'm trying to make a decision, policy decision, general plan decision, I want to make sure that the decision impacts the most, right? Has a greater impact in the community, and I feel like scenario 2 is that compromise. Clearly opposed to scenario 3. I'm not in support of closing the airport because I do see the benefit of keeping the airport. I see the economic development components of it. And of course, the things that they do for the larger community, like the 4th grade field trips to the airport and so forth. So I see a tremendous benefit in keeping that collaboration open and open communication with the airport and see how we can continue to strengthen that relationship. But scenario 2, even thinking about it through a public health perspective, I think will be the way to go. We have a lot of our families living under one roof, and that's not a way to live, right? With 3 families under one roof, with kids, it's just, that's not the vision that I have for our city. And so I think scenario 2 allows us that flexibility to continue to develop housing for all income levels. I am in support of keeping, under scenario 2, keeping the option C open as well for consideration to be able to better meet the needs of our community. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Two final things really quick. One is, I brought this up before in another meeting. I was just discussing this with somebody out there. Can we do something with our historical buildings preservation? We have some old buildings that I'd like to see preserved here so that they don't get torn down. I know not everybody feels that way on this council. But we do have some really beautiful buildings, like the Fox Theater, there's like a handful of buildings that I find historical in downtown, so it'd be great. You go to other communities, you see them restore their buildings. Victorians are really known here in Watsonville, so that's one thing. I don't know if this is the conversation to have it in, or and then 2 is in infrastructure. If we do move forward with Buena Vista, we have to have the county on board. I mean, they need to help with the roads and the streets. It's going to be highly impacted, so we cannot do that alone. If that's going to be a difficult terrain to build, so we cannot do it alone.
All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep my comments very, very brief. Most of my sentiments have been said. The one thing that I did want to say is I heard compromise a lot, and I think that is where we are at. I can safely say that everybody here is for some kind of compromise. I want to thank everyone for the very thoughtful comments, for showing up today. And where we're at now, scenario 2 looks like a compromise to me. I know high density housing may be unpopular. People don't want that, they're afraid of that, but looking at our RENA numbers, we can't meet that with just single family housing. So we really need to have some kind of diversity in our housing options. I have more to say, but just in the interest of time, I will leave it at that. And I will turn it back to Justin and Susan.
Just going to talk about a few next steps, but I just wanted to go back to the outcomes real quickly before we do the next steps, just to make sure that we covered what you wanted to cover. We talked about lots of public feedback. I think we achieved that. More in-depth discussion with incorporating everyone's opinions and feedback. I think that occurred. More clarity for the future and for the areas that you're looking at potentially developing and growing into in the future. Better understanding of the areas of change or the areas of potential. Educating the public, I think we took a step there, but to the council member's point on continuing that education with the public, there were a number of comments here on educating the public in a variety of different ways. So on the development process, those sorts of things as well. Desire for less litigation in the future. And I think that this whole idea of collaboration and compromise and working together is going to hopefully get there. And then a vision for the future. So I think you're definitely moving in that direction and have that vision for the future. So.
Thank you. Well, I think that is a very good summary. One thing to highlight, in some of the next steps, I mentioned before, the Regional Transportation Commission is having an open house on Monday. There'll also be a council on Tuesday to talk about some of the rail planning. Yes. Please, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, we have 2 meetings in March, and we were looking at the possibility of not having the March 13th or 12th meeting because we might not have a quorum because some of the councilors could be traveling. I don't think that's happening now, so that meeting might still be back on. So we're just going to be in March, but we'll get this out as soon as possible. We have 2 meetings on the 12th and the 26th, right? But this is a pretty important conversation, so the full council might want to be involved in that conversation. I'll work with the mayor on that. And so if that's the case, then we'll do March 26th. No, I know, but we have a couple of days.
But we can also move that meeting to like later on.
We can. So I'll work with the mayor on that. Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. So as highlighted on this, we've talked a lot about land use of the roads. A key component of that is about the airport. There's going to be, as just noted, a subsequent meeting coming up in the March timeframe on the second Tuesday or fourth Tuesday. And that will be determined. That date has changed multiple times. And so keep an eye out for that. I know many people in the room are very interested in this, so I just want to make sure that you're aware that that's coming up soon. As well as I was just mentioning, some other transportation-related activity at the regional level. There's been a long process of looking at our corridors, how to better connect North and South County, and the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, otherwise known as RTC, is funded for doing the planning for the alignments, the needed improvements, and some of the stations and where they go. So I want to highlight that work is underway. They're going to be in Ramsey Park, I believe, this Monday at 6 o'clock, and I believe they're also on the agenda to talk with council too on Tuesday. So other opportunities to understand more about what's going on at the regional level in terms of possibility of providing passenger rail service, because that's important to how the community can grow and get around. So those are some of the key things I just want to share with everyone here today. And first and foremost, just say thank you to the wonderful discussion that we've had with council and the community. This far exceeded my expectations for the amount of conversation and discourse and people. So I really want to applaud you for taking time to come out and speak with us. I thought it meant for a very good meeting and a good discussion. So I know it's now well after noon, and I'm sure people are getting hungry, so I don't want to keep anyone any longer, but I just want to applaud you for being here today.
Thank you very much. And with that, we are at our adjournment. Thank you very much. We hope to see you Tuesday.